AI Generative Fill in Photoshop has the ability to cause a fair degree of stress among amateur photographers. We already have debate that asks where the line is between genuine photographic work that we can claim as our own, as opposed to computer-generated, which we can't. AI Generative Fill doesn't just blur those lines, it nukes them completely. So why would this matter? Isn't photography always evolving? Well, it's likely going to matter to amateurs because if you belong to a camera club or a photographic society, a large part of your photographic world will be club competitions. Now that word competition does quite a number of things, some positive, some negative. On the positive side, it does inspire and encourage us all to be better at our photography and to try harder. When our images are given a mark in a competition by a competent judge, it gives us a rank amongst our peers. It helps us to see if we're making progress, to see how we're doing in relation to other members of our club. On the negative side, the word competition inspires a whole truckload of rules and regulations in an effort to keep those competitions fair. But rules and regulations are the enemy of creativity. Even if you're not a camera club member, the legitimate nature of your own photographic work is likely to be important to you and your own integrity. In an ideal world, people with integrity will want to be sure that what images they present to others is all their own work. The problem we may face is that we don't live in an ideal world. The nature of AI Generative Fill, and it's bound to get better than it currently is, already has the ability to fool even the most discerning judge, and that could prove irresistible to some. All of the images we've viewed so far were taken by me, but none of them could be now considered a legitimate entry into any camera club competition. Now, some of the changes that I've made are quite obvious, but most of them are not. Remember that Generative Fill will also remove content from an image, something we've been able to do now for quite some time. But with AI, it's now almost instant and in most cases foolproof. To download this beta version of Photoshop, go into your Creative Cloud app, down to the section saying Beta Apps, and you can download it from there. With an image opened up into the beta version of Photoshop, I've got the freehand lasso tool selected. Let's make a selection around the objects down here. As you can see, we don't have to be too careful, it's pretty quick and dirty. Now you'll notice you've got a little panel here. I'm going to put that up the top and I'm going to ask for it to be anchored there. I'm not sure this is fully working yet, but that's not vital. In the box which it says Generative Fill, if we click in there, but we don't type anything at all and just click Generate, I'll allow this to work in real time. You can see the green bar. What's happening here? This entire image is being taken up into the clouds, probably worked on by an Adobe supercomputer, and then sent back down to this new version of Photoshop. And look at the job that it's done there. Now, generally speaking, it'll give us 3 versions of whatever we ask it to do. So we get an opportunity to choose one of 3, so we can pick the one that we like best. On this particular occasion, number 1 is leaving a little bit of something there, and I think one of the others is probably better. But I think you'll agree that to be able to take away all of that so quickly and easily is pretty dramatic. Now, if we found that none of those 3 options are working to our satisfaction, we can go back and just click to regenerate, and we'll get a further 3 and we can see all of them shown here. So they're all kept, and we can see that it's added as a new layer, so the original image is always retained. The best of all worlds. So let's have a look and see what else we can do here. Maybe I'll select the polygonal lasso tool, maybe a bit easier for what I want to do here. Let's say I'm not too happy with what I've got here. A very quick selection around the outer edge. Click into the Generative Fill and hit the Enter or the Generate button, and will allow Photoshop to do its work once again. Now, in most cases, I've found this is very, very successful. Even in the worst case scenario, a couple of touches with the healing brush would be all we need. And there you can see an example. So here I have quite a nice image, nice sky, nice colour, nice reflections, but there's not a great deal going on. Let's select the rectangular marquee tool and see what we can create. Just going to click and drag over that area, and in the Generative Fill box, a sailing boat with sails, and I'll hit the Enter key. Once again, I'll allow this to run in real time, because none of this takes an enormous amount of time, as you can see with the previous examples. But as I remind you, this is being taken up into the clouds, worked on, and then returned to us. Now that's not a very good result at all. So let's have a look at some alternatives, and you can see the sort of thing we get with Generative Fill. We win some and we lose some. And quite often, if we go back and we start again, for example, let me try making a different selection. Not sure yet whether this is going to make any difference, but we can put that selection in place, and in the Generative Fill, a sailing boat facing left to right. It's not foolproof, as I've said a number of times, or I will say a number of times. So a lot of what I'm doing here is still trial and error. Does the AI know left to right yet? Remember, we're using a beta version. Well, as you can see here, it didn't give me exactly what I wanted. But let's take a look at the alternatives. Even that, it would not be seen as something that was instantly put into this picture, would it? And neither would that one. So we could try it once or twice. We could hit the Generate button. But I actually played around with this image last night, and I got a far better result. So just being aware that when I try to demonstrate it live, so you can see what and how it happens, I retain that copy. So we'll just take a look at these three. Not too keen on those at all. That one works pretty well. I quite like that. But let me open up the one that I did last night, where the way I achieved it was exactly what I did just here. The difference with AI is even if you make the same selection, you're not going to get the same thing every time. Try changing the way you describe whatever you want placed in the picture. So yesterday, when I made the selection in exactly the same way and asked the Generative Fill to give me a boat, that's what it gave me. And that, I think, looks pretty good given the lighting conditions we have. But then I got a little bit cocky with what I've done, and I drew a selection in from the right-hand side and asked for an old wooden jetty. This is AI. Here's another example, and I've selected the rectangular marquee tool. Let's draw a selection over here, and I'm going to ask for a 1950s car. Let's see what the AI can produce for us here. Remember, it'll always give us 3 versions. We can click to regenerate if we want to choose from 6 or 9. We can keep going until we get something that really fits well. Now, most of the time, as you can see, we do get a pretty good result. Let's take a look at the other versions. That one would work. and so would that one. But to be honest, I quite like the one that came up first of all. Even if it is a little bit awkward on the road, it looks as though it's been parked there. Here we have another interesting image, but it doesn't have a strong centre of interest. So in a compositionally strong position, maybe if I pick up my lasso tool and I make a lasso shape around there, and I could ask for a red berry. That would certainly create our centre of interest. Now, one of the things I've discovered is that every time we ask for the same thing, we do get something a little different. We've got to be prepared for that. It's not something we can repeat, but we need to remember this is a beta version after all. But there you can see we get a pretty good result straight out of the box. Let's take a look at the other examples. That one also looks okay, and so does that one. In fact, that one probably looks a little more authentic. Now, one of the things I've discovered is once I started playing around with this AI generative fill, it does become quite compelling. Sometimes it's knowing when to stop. Maybe a couple of more examples. Elliptical marquee is what I have here. I'm going to draw a very simple selection, and I'm going to ask for a lake with trees, and I'll hit the enter key. Now, I did speed up the process a little bit there using video recording, but as you can see, the result it gave me is entirely believable. Let's take a look at the other two. That's also believable, and that one too. But all of these are different to the effect I got when I tried this the previous evening, and those three examples were equally as good. Now, here's an image that I used in a previous short video with just some AI examples. Let's see if I can recreate something similar to what I did before. I doubt it, but let's give it a try. I want to add some canvas here, so I'm going to anchor the canvas at the top. I'll add percentage. Let's say I'll add 25% onto the top. Let's make it a bit less actually. Let's make it 15%. We'll see if it squashes the reflection that I want to make. Hit Control 0. There you can see what I've added at the bottom. With the rectangular marquee tool, I'll draw a selection right along the base there and add water with a reflection. Enter. And there we can see the result. I'll hit Control 0 and that looks pretty good to me. But let's take a look at the other two examples. Not a great deal of change there. That one's not so good. So you can see exactly how this works. But of course, if you wasn't satisfied, you can just regenerate and see if the next three are more to your liking. Here's my final example, I promise, because as I say, it's very difficult to stop once you start playing around with AI generative fill. Does this mean it's going to be irresistible to some? Well, who knows? Let me draw on a selection here and see if I can create an old wooden jetty. I've used this a couple of times in different images and it seems to work okay. Hitting the enter key, Photoshop, do your best. The type of selection we make and where we place that selection obviously has quite a bearing on how the generative fill works, so I'm sure we'll get more experience with this as time moves on. Let's take a look at what the other two versions have given me. That one looks quite good. There's a little bit of an odd thing down the left hand side, but nothing we couldn't deal with. That one I think looks best of all. So if we were looking for a jetty, a little bit of work on the bottom corner, but virtually a perfect result first time. Now, with the change of the image on screen, what I did here was drew a different selection, but similar to the previous, and I asked to create an old wooden jetty with posts. I allowed the AI to determine what I meant by posts, and this version looks pretty good to me. I'll see you next time.